Hi everybody, this is your science teacher, John Walker, and we are going to cover one of the really better tools in the scientific arena that we study, because it teaches us how to really take a look at issues and problems in science, and then how to conduct a scientific investigation using the scientific method. And we're going to cover that right now. So let's take a look at these words here. Scientific method is a process for experimentation that is used to answer questions and explore observations. Scientists use an experiment to search for cause and effect relationship in nature, right? Okay, we want to know what's the pull of gravity. Well, we do experiments. In other words, they design an experiment so that changes to one item causes something else to vary in a predictable way. These changing quantities are called variables, and variables are the key element of the scientific method. Okay. Now, when we get into this, scientists, of course, are always trying to figure out, what is matter, how does it react, what does it do, what's going to happen to this. And as we, discover more and more about our universe and matter and how it comes together and how it comes apart, we ask the question, what question would you like to be answered? What problem would you like solved? Okay? And so we try to define what is the question. And we make observations and we make inferences. Inferences are kind of little mini conclusions. So the first thing you do is to find out as much as you can that other researchers or scientists have discovered about a problem that you're interested in. You explore the internet or library. You talk to experts that already have good data and some evaluations and observations about what you're really trying to figure out. In this phase, you're gathering information and making inferences that will help you write your hypothesis. Okay, now hypothesis. Don't let that word scare you. Okay. After having researched a topic, you should have some prediction about what you think will happen in your experiment. This understanding, based on your observations and inferences concerning the outcome, is called your hypothesis. Now, there are two variables here, and we're gonna really get into that now. A hypothesis is worded so that it can be tested in your experiment. Do this by expressing the hypothesis using an independent variable, and that's the variable that you change during your experiment, and a dependent variable, that's the variable that changes in response and depends on the change to the independent variable. So I'm going to have one variable, independent variable, and I'm going to predict that that when I change that independent variable, it will cause a change in the dependent variable. Okay. So my hypothesis is that doubling the opening created by a faucet, that would be the independent variable, changing the opening on a faucet will, increase or decrease the flow. But if I open it, twice as much, will it double the flow of water? Well, I could measure that, couldn't I? Not every question can be answered by the scientific method. The hypothesis is the key. If you can state your question as a measurable hypothesis, you can use the scientific method to obtain an answer. Now, key vocabulary words in the hypothesis. This is in the hypothesis now, not in the other parts of it. Variables, anything that can affect the outcome of an experiment. The independent variable has to be absolutely specific, and it has to be a variable that can be changed and altered by the scientist. Okay, the dependent variable is what the scientist is looking that changes in response to the change the scientist makes to the independent variable. And then constants. These are controlled variables. We don't want other variables changing because we want to try to find out, does the dependent variable, does that act accordingly to when we change the independent variable? And when that happens, we don't want other constants being varied also. So we want to keep those the same. Okay? Now, scientists use an experiment to search for causes and effects relationship in nature. In other words, they design an experiment so that changes in one item causes something else to vary in a predictable way. These changing quantities are called variables, and the experiment usually has three kinds: independent, dependent, and control. We just went over that. The independent variable is the one that is changed by the scientist, so we're covering some old ground here. As the scientist changes the independent variable, he or she carefully observes what happens. The dependent variable changes in response to the change the scientist makes in the independent variable, okay? And the new value of the dependent variable is caused and depends on the value of the independent variable. Okay? So it gets a little confusing, but if you just read it a few times and go back over it, you'll understand. And I'm going to give you some really good examples of how this plays out. Okay, now and I gave you an example of the faucet and the quantity of the water and things like that. So, okay, let's see here. All right, so I'm going to, okay, now to test the hypothesis or conducting experiments. Now that you've come up with a hypothesis, you need to develop a procedure for testing whether it's true or false. Okay, and you come up with an experiment, and you make careful observations. You record the data, analyze the data, keeping notes, study the data. Does the data support the hypothesis? Does the data show something wrong in your experiment? Do you need to gather more data? And then you have a conclusion. This is your opportunity to explain the meaning of your results. Did your experiment support your hypothesis? Does additional research need to be conducted? How did your experiment address your initial question and purpose? So the conclusion is a statement that sums up what you have learned from the experiment. Okay? And maybe you have to do another experiment. So, okay? And then you write a report. Written report should contain the following. And that's the end of that. And I'm going to go back over a little bit, and we're going to cover some examples, and that's going to be in the next video.